With our land acknowledgement, we respectfully acknowledge that we are on the treaty and traditional territory of the Mississauga and Ashbek. We offer our gratitude to the First Peoples for their care for and teachings about our earth and our relations. May we honor those teachings. I'd ask that everybody observe a moment of silence so that council staff and members of the public can quietly reflect on our duty to the community that we are trying to serve. Thank you very much. Members of the public, staff, presenters, and members of council, please be advised that meetings are broadcast and recorded and made available on the internet. Is there any declaration of pecuniary interest and general nature thereof? Madam Clerk, I see none. We have one set of minutes before us. That's the minutes of August the 10th, 2021. Moved by Anita, seconded by Sherry. Donna has a question? No, all in favor? Carried. Okay, any discussion of those? There are none. That will take us to our deputations. And so our first deputation is a staff introduction. If our technology has been solved, maybe, yes? We'll pause for a moment.
Hi there.
Hi. Brandy, are you there?
I can't hear you very well, but I just wanted to say hello.
Well, it's welcome. Janice, are you going to say a couple words?
Yes, please, if you don't mind.
Yeah.
I'm very pleased to introduce Brandy Mocha to you this evening. Brandy joined us in mid-July at the front customer service desk. She'll be providing frontline customer service for us, as well as helping out with agenda prep and some social media support, and I'm sure lots of other things. So Brandy's very friendly smile and voice are a welcome addition. We're very, very happy to have her with us on the team, and I hope you will join me in welcoming her. I would just turn it to Brandy for a minute if she'd like to turn her camera on, just so that you can put a face to the name and just say hello. If technology will allow. She's there.
No, I don't think it's going to work, but Brandy, can you hear us?
I can hear you. It's very faint, but I'm not getting the option to turn on a camera.
Okay, well, we'll just have to chalk that up to technology. And
Yeah, sorry about that.
Just, on behalf of council, I just want to welcome you to the township. It's a great place to work. There's a great group of people to work with. And I know that you'll enjoy serving the public. It's a great community, and it's great to have you aboard. And I don't know if you want to say anything specific, but go ahead.
Thank you so much. I'm very excited to be with the township as well.
Okay, thank you and have a good evening. We appreciate your time. Okay, colleagues, we'll go on to our second deputation, and that is our federal NDP candidate for the election that's ongoing. And there's Joy. Welcome, Joy, and thank you for coming.
Well, bonjour, merci, miigwech. Good evening, your worship, councillors and participants in today's meeting. Bringing you greetings, brief remarks from Nogo Jiwanang, Peterborough. I'm Joy La Chica, and I am running as your federal NDP candidate in this federal election. Just a little info about me. I came to Canada as an immigrant from the Philippines as a child. And I grew up in Southern Ontario, in and around Guelph for the most part. I've been a public elementary school teacher for over 25 years. And I was elected to the Elementary Teachers of Toronto local in 2015. And also in 2017, I was elected as an executive board member of the Elementary Teachers Federation of Ontario. And in that time, I certainly have spent KPR, special events and occasions, and have gotten to know lots of the education workers and the teachers here. And, you know, this really is my home. I've had a residence in the area for more than 18 years, and moving to Peterborough as home a year ago has just been really exciting. I continue to work as a labor leader remotely in this pandemic, but I have a deep connection to families and community from my career as an educator, as a teacher. And I believe that my background brings fresh eyes to our riding. And I think that my experience brings me naturally to the role of a federal candidate and for the New Democrats, and proud to be a representative of our party. The impact of this pandemic has spared none of us. And in fact, our common struggles have brought us together in new and unique ways as individuals and in our families and in our communities. But to get through this fourth wave now of a pandemic and to emerge stronger, we must respond urgently like never before, locally, provincially, and federally. We need governance that works collaboratively, lifting up our communities together and leaving no one behind. As my partner and I took our 11-year-old to Prince of Wales this morning for the first day of school, we met her grade 6 teacher, which was very exciting. But, you know, as I reflected, and as I've been thinking in these recent weeks, I think about Matilda, and I think about the planet and about her future. We've just seen New York City subways and streets be engulfed by water with Hurricane Ida, and just how unexpectedly and spontaneously that happened. Such a shock, and what a tremendous tragedy for those who had to deal with that. And we've seen the devastation of Lytton, British Columbia, a whole town wiped away by fires that continue to ravage whole swaths of our western and central forests. When I see those images of billowing smoke and the flame, I take a deep dive, and I think in my soul, how can climate action even be a choice? How can people be denying that this is happening? We do have a choice to make very soon, and on Election Day. We have had 6 years for urgent climate action to happen under a Liberal government. But of all of the G7 countries, we're last in terms of reducing our carbon emissions. In fact, we've increased them, and that's a shame. But New Democrats are ready for action to meet targets now with transparency and mechanisms for accountability. We have a plan to address our housing crisis, to address senior care, and all of the mental health and public health needs of our riding, so impacted by addiction and overdose than anywhere else in the country, twice as much. We need equity of access to clean water today in Curve Lake. We have 31 reserves across this nation that still have boil water advisories and do not have access to clean water. We've had lots of time, and it still hasn't happened. We need to take action now. We also know that things like in our local areas, internet access is spotty and not consistent. In Selwyn, Duro-Dummer, and North Kawartha, it's been good to talk to those folks at meetings like this. We need to listen to the challenges and concerns of our farmers. We also need to support the recovery of our small businesses. All levels of government must own and address our local issues strategically, like there is no tomorrow, because the struggle is real and there is no time to waste. I'm committed to the triage in Selwyn and Peterborough Kawartha, to the analysis and the deep organizing that needs to be done around our riding and here in this beautiful township. The action must happen in tandem with campaigns, snap elections, and in the forming of responsible governments. We need to work together. A September cheer to those in Selwyn who are in the fields bringing crops and provisions to the market this week, to Curve Lake, to Lakefield, to Buckhorn families, beginning fall routines and a first day back to school, to the incredible volunteers and medical workers in Peterborough, Kawartha who have been working tirelessly at mass clinics and still at pharmacies, helping so many of us feel safer and freer after not just one, but 2 vaccines. Thank you. And as the September 20th election day approaches, and you can vote early until September 14th at your polls, I thank you again for allowing me this brief opportunity to bring these remarks to you and to talk a little bit about what my priorities are as a leader. You can be certain that if I'm elected as your federal NDP MP, I'll be working, rolling up my sleeves every day, listening and urgently fighting for you in Selwyn. Thank you.
Thank you, Joy. Colleagues, anybody want to make a comment? Yes, Donna.
Yes, through you. To you, Joy, thank you so much for being here tonight and giving us parts of your platform. You really said a lot of important or outlined a lot of important issues. If you are elected, you're going to be a very busy girl. I just wondered one thing. If you are elected, if you have a plan of how you would be accessible to your constituents on a fairly regular basis. That's been somewhat of a challenge for us in the past. So I just wondered what plan you had for that.
Thank you for that question. And there's nothing that would mean more to me than to be present and connected to all the wonderful people that I've already begun to build relationships with. I'm in this because I really enjoy people and community and want to be present. So it's an absolute priority. I am rooted here. I don't want to be anywhere else. I certainly, of course, if I would be elected, there's that time spent in the House, but my first plan would be to get home as quickly as I could so that I can be present for my community and my family, my friends that are here. This is what's important. I do have an NDP website and I do have an NDP email, and I certainly comb it on a regular basis every day. So certainly constituents would be able to contact me regularly on that, and on my website as well. So I just to assure you of that, I will be present and available and anytime. Thank you.
Thank you, Joy, and good luck.
Thanks very much. Have a wonderful meeting.
Joy, just before you go,
Yes.
in conclusion, I just want to take the opportunity as somebody who's had the privilege of serving in the House to thank you for your willingness to put your name forward and to run for public office. It is not an easy thing to do, and you're going ahead and doing it and putting yourself out there. And so regardless of what might come on September 20th, to thank you for your willingness to serve our community. So we appreciate it very much.
I thank you so much, and a good evening to you all.
Thank you.
Good night. Bye-bye.
Thank you, colleagues. We'll move on to our next presentation, which is I believe, Stantec is going to be dealing with the off-road vehicles. So we will just let Stantec come up. There we go.
Hi, good afternoon, Mr. Mayor, members of council. Thank you for the opportunity to present this evening on the county's transportation master plan update, and specifically in relation to the ORV study component of their use on county roadways. I've just shared my screen. Hopefully you can see it.
Yeah, we've got it.
Excellent. All right. So, so with me this evening are Peter Nielsen from Peterborough County, who I may call upon as the presentation. If there are questions afterwards that are best addressed to Peter, as well as my colleague Diana Adley from Stantec, who may also be called upon to answer questions during the period following the presentation.
Yeah,
So-
and if I could just, as you're getting going, we keep our presentations to 10 minutes. So if I could ask you to.
Certainly, yes, certainly, Mr. Mayor. We've tried to structure it that way. So, so just in terms of our objectives for this evening's meeting presentation, we wanted to provide this opportunity to update Township Council on the progress of the ORV on County Roads study, and briefly summarize the decision-making process that Peterborough County has put in place for addressing this important issue. We also wanted to, as part of this exercise, outline the potential approaches for addressing ORV use on county roads, and to speak to you a little bit about what our next steps are, including engagement. But before we get into sort of talking a little bit more about the specifics of the study itself, I thought we would just do a very brief review of the regulatory framework that's in place in Ontario to regulate the use of off-road vehicles on public roadways. Because I think it's important to sort of recognize that there's a slightly different set of rules that the county is required to oblige by than the township. So the Highway Traffic Act is the guiding piece of legislation that regulates the use of off-road vehicles on Ontario roadways. And there's a specific regulation 31603 that sets out the rules regarding the operation of off-road vehicles on highways. It operates in conjunction with a broader Off-Road Vehicles Act, which lays out the specifics pertaining to off-road vehicles themselves, and that's both on public and private properties, their use, including things such as their safety measures, the vehicle dimensions, and other factors that play into the operation of off-road vehicles in Ontario. But I guess one of the things that's really sort of changed the landscape in Ontario is that on January 1st, the province made some changes to the regulation concerning off-road vehicle use on highways that now in effect allows off-road vehicles on all township roads. Previously, the municipality would have had to pass a bylaw specifically authorizing the use of off-road vehicles on its roadways. But now it's the inverse situation whereby it's permitted as of right on township roads, unless the municipality passes a bylaw to restrict or prohibit ORV access on some or all of its roadways. And they may also set out specific provisions around their use as well through those bylaws. But it's important to note that the change in regulation didn't impact the county, and it doesn't affect the county's roads. So ORVs still cannot be operated unless they're specifically permitted by bylaw on the county's roadways, which is the opposite of what can happen at the township level. So just sort of a very brief overview of the current ORV bylaw situation in the county. The township of Cavan-Monaghan has passed a bylaw that doesn't permit the use of off-road vehicles on its roadways. It's specifically done that since the regulation has changed. The township of Duro-Dummer has a bylaw that permits off-road vehicles on certain county or certain township roads, but doesn't on the other ones. And then the more northern municipalities of Havelock and easterly ones of Havelock, Belmont, Methuen, North Kawartha, and Trent Lakes all permit off-road vehicles on all of its roadways. Now, the county currently has a bylaw that restricts off-road vehicle use on its roadways, save and except for 11 roadway sections in the township of Havelock, Belmont, Methuen. And that bylaw is still in its effect currently. And as a result or an outcome of this study, the county would be looking to either keep it intact or make the necessary revisions, modifications, amendments that arise as a result of this study. We do note that 3 of the county's municipalities, including yourselves, currently don't have a bylaw pertaining to ORV use on its roadways. Just a brief overview of how we've engaged participants to date. We've had 2 rounds of consultation. Our first round was done about a year ago, where we issued a broad survey to allow participants to provide us any specific issues or locations of ORV use that they felt were relevant to bring to our attention. We then did a second round survey towards the end of last year, beginning of this year, to get more defined information about mapping existing and desirable ORV routes to assist us in better understanding sort of the scope of ORV use in the county, and where, if people had their options, they would prefer to see ORVs used. We then invited a series of deputations to the Transportation Master Plan Steering Committee meeting in April to provide their views on ORV use on county roads. I believe there was 8 deputations, and they offered differing viewpoints. Some were for, some were against, but they did provide a range of opinions that I think was beneficial to the steering committee as well as our team in better understanding some of the concerns in a little greater detail. Since that time, we've had a series of meetings, some with lower tier municipal staff at the end of June, and then we've met with the First Nations at Hiawatha and Curve Lake to get their input as well into this issue. So what we've heard to date, I'm not going to go through every point because I think you probably have heard most of them over time. But what I would say is that there are certainly very, different opinions when you ask people. Some may say it's sort of divided, but there's a lot of strong opinions one way or the other with respect to the use of ORVs on county roadways. There are a number of people that are concerned for a variety of reasons. But we did hear a lot of feedback from individuals about the benefits their use offered. Now, in terms of sort of how the county is going to make its way through this decision-making process, we took a report and a presentation to the Transportation Master Plan Steering Committee as well as County Council at the end of May, getting their authorization to apply the process that you see on your screen. These 6 stages would enable us to work our way through the consideration of allowing ORV use on county roadways. As you can see, currently we're in stage 4, which is where we're consulting with the lower tier municipalities, the First Nations, and the public on the potential approaches, which I'll talk about in just a second, and any implementation considerations that are important for us to keep in mind as we move forward. Once we've gone through this consultation process, our plan is to develop a recommended strategy that we would then present to the Transportation Master Plan Steering Committee, and they would then move it forward to County Council for consideration, depending obviously on sort of the feedback that we receive through this process. And then obviously once a strategy is accepted, then we would look to implement the approved strategy. Now, we've looked at a series of different potential approaches for moving forward with the ORV use on county roads. And we've sort of struck them into sort of 3 categories or 3 different approaches. One approach the county could take is to allow ORV use on all of its roadways. So basically throw it open and allow ORV use on any section of county roadway. The sort of polar opposite of that is that the county could take the position that it won't allow any ORV use on roads under its jurisdiction. And then there's an alternative that we're calling alternative 2, that's something in between, whereby the county will allow ORV use on its roads in select locations. And what we would end up doing is creating a network of ORV routes that would be permissible for operation on the county road system. Now, as we make our way through the evaluation of these alternatives, there's a number of considerations that we're keeping in mind. First and foremost, there's the legislation and the regulations that govern what can and can't be done. So we have to work within that framework. We're also looking at the potential benefits that have been expressed, and also as well as the potential disbenefits in assessing the various alternatives. There are other factors such as enforcement, the impacts of ORV use on private property, and the needs to upgrade the county's infrastructure are other factors that we're taking into consideration as we move through the exercise. Excuse me. We look at alternative 1 and alternative 3, they're very easily sort of understood. It's either all or nothing. But alternative 2 requires a little bit more explanation and a little bit more evaluation from our perspective. So we recognize that there's been no decision made yet with respect to any of the alternatives, but we felt that it was important to start looking at developing a potential network of county roads that would be accessible for ORV use if alternative 2 was the preferred way to go forward. So what we've been doing is we've been working through a process to come up with this conceptual network through a sort of a 5-step exercise where we've established a series of criteria and evaluation factors that are guiding our selection of the routes for the network. Then taking those criteria, building a database based on geographical information and traffic data to help us score the various road segments to see whether they're compatible for ORV use. And then once we have these road segments that we feel are compatible from a technical perspective, we look at qualitative factors such as proximity to various different types of land uses, their function in terms of connecting different trails together, things of that nature to come up with the conceptual network plan, which we can see right here. So as we've shown in the exhibit, this is still conceptual. We're still taking feedback, getting further input from the various stakeholders and participants in the process, before we come forward, if alternative 2 is the selected option to present the conceptual network plan. We're also using this opportunity for gathering feedback and to be able to address a number of issues that still we haven't completely reconciled at this point. The first being the extent and the configuration of the network if alternative 2 is the selected option. We also have to give consideration to the county road shoulders. Some of them are not currently wide enough or structurally adequate to accommodate ORV use. So we would have to give that consideration and what sort of impact that would have, both from the ability to use that section of county road, as well as the potential cost if the decision was to upgrade them. There's also an absence of recognized signing, pavement marking, and roadside safety features for sharing public roads with ORVs. So right now, the signing and pavement markings are really focused on vehicles on the traveled portion of the roadway, not so much on ORVs on the shoulder, or even the sharing of ORVs with vehicles on the roadway. We would also look at, we also need to give further consideration to risk mitigation insurance, very important issues for municipalities, as well as if there are to be any restrictions or potential enforcement factors that need to play into the decision-making process. And finally, and I think, not the least, which is extremely important for municipalities, is the financial impacts of moving ahead with the recommended plan. So our next steps are, as I said, we're completing a series of council presentations to the lower tier municipalities within the county. We're about halfway through at this point. We still have another few to go this month. So that'll provide an opportunity for all of the municipal councils to hear the same presentation and give thought to their views on ORV use, particularly on county roads. We're also getting underway with an online public consultation session that's going to start up on Thursday, where we're going to give the public the opportunity to comment on the various approaches and give us their feedback. Then based on all of the feedback that we gather and if there needs to be further technical analysis, we'll bring a strategy to the Transportation Master Plan Steering Committee, who will then consider whether to forward it to County Council this fall. So with that, Mr. Mayor, happy to answer any questions that you may have.
Thank you very much. Colleagues, any questions? Yes, Anita.
Thank you for your presentation. Just one question I have, and then I want to make some comments. So on screen number 4, it says Selwyn currently does not have a bylaw. So if I'm reading that correctly, that ATVs would be allowed on township roads.
Through the mayor, that is correct.
Does staff have any thoughts on actually passing a bylaw or?
I think Janice had something that you wanted to say on that, right?
And then I just want to make a few comments. I personally think it's a good idea. It looks like you've been doing a lot of work. Sometimes we go from our hunt camp property in North Kawartha, we go up past Tory Hill into whatever that municipality is up there, and then up to Wilberforce on the ATV. And so some of it is on, public roadways to match up with the ATV trail network. So I'm glad to see that this consultation is going on, because I think you'll find a lot of locals that would really like to see something like this. So it's a good job what you're doing.
Janice, did you want to speak to the issue of the township's response?
Sure. So previously, we never had a bylaw. As Jean mentioned previously, ATVs or ORVs were not allowed on township roads unless we had a specific bylaw to allow them. Certainly when we considered that, because there were no trail systems that made sense to access from township roads, we never chose in the past to have a bylaw to allow them. So with the provincial legislation changing, of course, that impacts all of our roads, and under provincial legislation, ATVs, ORVs would be allowed. So with the county going through this review as part of the Transportation Master Plan, and specifically looking at ORVs, we really wanted to see what direction, what feedback the county received, and also what direction the county was considering before coming forward with any type of a recommendation to council or consideration of any type of public process that we would go through.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions? Yes, Donna.
Yes, I just wanted to make a comment. This is a very comprehensive process, and I feel that you're thinking about everything. My only concern when it's all said and done, and if you choose to allow I forget what you call them, all-terrain vehicles, I'm going to call it ORVs, on some roads or all roads, it's the enforcement that's the issue, and that it would just be another thing that would go down to the OPP or the police. That's my only concern. It's difficult to enforce, and they already have their hands full with a lot. I don't know if there's an answer to that. It's just a comment, really.
Thank you, Donna. And I should just mention before I let our guests go, I do sit on the Transportation Master Plan Committee. So we are engaged through that process, and it has been a significant amount of work on behalf of Stantec and their associates, along with county staff, and it's very much appreciated. So thank you, gentlemen. We appreciate it, and I suspect we have a TMP meeting coming up in the not too distant future. Thank you. Good night.
Thank you.
We will now call our public meeting. Oh, that would probably be a really good idea. Thank you. Carrie, seconded by Anita. All those in favor, carried. Thank you. Okay, we're going to move to our public meeting, and perhaps, Pierre, you can announce the purpose of our public meeting.
Thank you, Your Worship. So we have a statutory public meeting tonight for 2 applications. One is a township initiated application and the other one is privately initiated. These are files C10-21 and C06-21. The township will be amending the zoning bylaw for the township of Selwyn in accordance with section 34 of the Planning Act. For the township initiated boarding house bylaw, public notice was provided through the Peterborough Examiner through a notice that was provided on August 16th in accordance with the requirements of the Planning Act. With regard to the privately initiated let me get the number straight here. C10-21 notice was provided by prepaid first-class mail to all residents within 120-meter radius of the property subject to the application, as well as by a way of a sign posted on the property. The notice was provided via email and fax to the not fax, just email in both cases. Sorry, it's written here in my pre-written notes here, but to the prescribed ministries and agencies. The notice is also available on the township's website. If a person or public body does not make oral submissions at the public meeting or make written submissions to the township of Selwyn before the bylaws are passed, the person or public body is not entitled to appeal the decisions of the council of the township to the Ontario Land Tribunal, nor can a person or public body be added to a party to the hearing of an appeal before the OLT, unless in the opinion of the tribunal there are reasonable grounds to do so. So the first one, public meeting, is for C10-21, which is the applicant's name is Mohair. This is at Part Lot 9, Concession 5 in Ennismore. This is a zoning bylaw amendment as a condition of a consent approval. The effect of the technical consent, the county's approval at the consent level is for a lot addition, which essentially removes one lot at one location and moves it to another location. So there's no new lot being created. It's just shifting a rural residential lot from one location to another. The existing lot is fronting on Robinson Road, and the new lot, which is technically the retained lot in this case, will front onto Ennis Road. The severed parcel, the big piece that's going to be joined to the smaller rural residential lot, is about 50.78 hectares or 125.5 acres. And the retained parcel is about 0.7 hectares or 1.38 hectares. On the severed parcel, there's currently only 2 barns, and the retained parcel is currently vacant. You'll see that in my report that, in my opinion, it meets, it conforms to the growth plan for the Great Oak Golden Horseshoe. It's consistent with the provincial policy statement. It meets the requirements and conforms with the township's official plan. And there is no concerns from the public in regard to this application. And we have agency comments from, to the page here. We have comments from Peterborough Public Health, the County of Peterborough Public Works, and Kawartha Pine Ridge District School Board of no concern. That's my summation of that report. Any questions?
Okay. First of all, Madam Clerk, is there anybody from the public register to speak either for or against this application?
We have no one here to speak to this application.
Thank you. Colleagues? Yes, Donna?
Yes, thank you very much. Through you to Per. I have talked to you about this severance, Per, and I understand totally now, but I just wanted for you to state in the public record, because there's a little bit of frenzy going on in this area of Ennismore, and I live very close to it, that there's going to be a subdivision created. So could you state into the public record that that is not happening?
Through you, Your Worship. Yes, that's correct. There is very clearly, there's not a subdivision development being proposed in this case. The large remnant parcel, or the severed parcel in this case, is going to continue to be used as a farm parcel. The rezoning is merely to recognize that the 2 barns on the severed portion are too close to the two lot lines at the north end of the property. And the rezoning of the retained parcel, the small parcel that you see on the drawing in my report, will be rezoned to rural residential to permit for a future home.
Thank you. That satisfied? Okay, I don't see any other questions. So we do have a recommendation thank you. Somebody want to second it? Donna, all those in favor? That's carried. Okay, item number 2.
So item number 2 is C 06-21, Township File C 06-21. This is a township initiated zoning bylaw amendment for boarding, lodging, and rooming houses. Essentially, this is going to permit these types of this type of use within the R1, R2, and R3s zones within the municipality, provided that those homes are located on and serviced by municipal water and sewer services. So again, it'll come down to the, as we're familiar here and referred to as the Woodland Acres community, the Summer Lane community, as well as Lakefield. It's intended to, it's responding to a concern of rooming houses for students being created in the Lakefield and Summer Lane communities. And the bylaw intends to regulate those through introduction of a number of measures. The significant portions of the bylaw include regulations that and criteria that include that a maximum number of bedrooms in the boarding, lodging, or rooming house shall be 6. A maximum number of people accommodated with any boarding, lodging, or rooming house shall also not exceed 6. That there be no cooking facilities permitted in any bedroom other than a kitchen of a boarding, lodging, or rooming house. That there will be a minimum amenity area in the rear yard of said lots that have these facilities of not less than 100 square meters. That the boarding, lodging, or rooming house complies with the requirements of the Ontario Building Code, Fire Code, and the Residential Tenancies Act. That the boarding, lodging, or rooming house shall be registered with the Township of Selwyn in accordance with the normal requirements of the township. That the sole use of the building shall be as a boarding, lodging, or rooming house. And a second unit is not permitted on a lot that is used for a boarding, lodging, or rooming house. In addition to the zoning amendment, there will also be a licensing bylaw introduced. If there's questions in regard to that after my presentation, Rob may be better to answer those particular questions. But again, the licensing is also designed to regulate these houses to make sure that they are being operated safely. Through my review of the Planning Act provisions and applicable provincial plan policy, I find that the proposed amendment conforms to the growth plan. It's consistent with the provincial policy statement. It conforms to the township and county official plan. And that's my summation of that particular application.
Thank
Any
you, Bill.
questions?
First of all, to the clerk, do we have anybody registered to speak for or against this?
We have no one here registered.
Okay, we will go to first Deputy Mayor.
Thank you. Through you. I know a couple of people who came out to the public information meeting on this, and they had input and questions, and they're very satisfied with what's coming forward as a result of the public information meeting. I draw your attention to your report, page 3, second last paragraph here, where it says, while the proposed zoning bylaw amendment will not be retroactive to existing board houses as the function of section 34(9) of the Planning Act, the related proposed boarding house licensing bylaw will apply to existing and new boarding, lodging, and rooming houses. Can you please explain the meaning of that? Because it sounds confusing. What does that mean?
Yeah, so essentially it's making a distinction all through your worship. It's making an extinction. It's making an distinction, excuse me, between the zoning bylaw amendment, which is provided for under the Planning Act, and the licensing bylaw, which is a provision of the Municipal Act. And it just simply means that there'll be zoning control on any future boarding, lodging, or rooming houses, which is different from existing ones. So anything existing now would not need to adhere to the specific provisions in this amendment. We can't make it retroactive, but they will still be required to obtain a license.
Okay, so just for clarification purposes, if there is a boarding house that has 9 bedrooms now existing, they will still be allowed to have those 9 bedrooms.
Well, I can speak to that.
Okay.
Thank you.
Sure. Yeah, so that would apply in instances where the current dwelling is conforming, right? So I would say that in the context of a 9-bedroom house, there isn't such an animal in Summer Lane, and there isn't such an animal in Woodland Acres, but there may be 1 or 2 in Lakefield, right? Not, there may be, I'm not aware of any 9-bedroom houses in Lakefield, but to answer your question, that 9-bedroom house would have to have been legal, right, when it was built, and we'd have to have recognized that the building code would, the building permit would have to have been issued for a 9-bedroom house for us to consider it legal, right? And so if it was legal, then when we pass this bylaw, it becomes legal non-conforming, right, if it's being used for that purpose. And then we have to recognize that. We can't implement the 6-bedroom limit, but all the provisions of the licensing will still apply. They still have to run it in a way that's, proper. They'll have to ensure that there's no any of the provisions in our licensing bylaw would still continue to apply, right? But it's those provisions that we've implemented through the Planning Act through the zoning bylaw that wouldn't apply in the context of a legal non-conforming dwelling.
Okay.
So part of the reason we chose, just to your point, part of the reason we chose 6 bedrooms, as a maximum, and we didn't believe that would fly in the face of the provisions that tell us we shouldn't be having limits, right? Because there are other limits that or other documents that we have to have regard for that are pro, housing and pro, is that we just weren't aware of any, certainly in the areas where there's pressure for this type of housing, like Summer Lane and Woodland Acres, of any dwellings that have 6 bedrooms or more than 6 bedrooms. Right? So I think in that context, we said, look, this really isn't going to limit anybody to any degree in those areas because there really aren't any today. So hopefully that provides a bit of a response.
Yeah, thank you. I just wanted to ask a question for clarity purposes and have it on the public record. Thank you. Thank you both.
Donna?
Just one additional item. I just can't see it here fast enough. So if it's one thing we really heard a lot about was the parking for existing rooming houses in Woodland, Summer Lane area. So would the existing ones have to follow our parking regulations?
Yeah, unfortunately, Councilor Ballantyne, in the context of the planning regulations, so long as the boarding house existed, and we didn't have provisions for parking for boarding houses in the previous bylaw. So if there's an existing boarding house with, say, 4 bedrooms that would require, or 5 bedrooms that would require 5 parking spaces, we couldn't require them to add spaces if they didn't quite meet it today, right? Because that's one of the provisions in the zoning bylaw that we couldn't make retroactive.
Okay, so we may still have some problems with that.
Yeah, so I guess to your point, we are examining. I have asked Chris Tassone, our bylaw enforcement officer, to look at on-street parking regulations, because that's the spillover is that if they can't park in the driveway associated with the dwelling, then they park on the road, right? So certainly in the winter, it's an issue because we do limit parking overnight. But throughout the year, we may want to introduce parking regulations on street that will help with some of the issues that they've been suffering in that subdivision.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, Anita?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The question with regards to retroactivity and also the parking were 2 of the questions I was going to ask. Another complaint that we had with regards to the Woodland Acres area was the noise. So if there's, let's say there was 5 or 6 boarding houses with 6 bedrooms each, theoretically there'd be like 36 or 40 people within a very small space. would our bylaw enforcement officer or Kawartha Guard or the OPP be the ones responsible for, basically dealing with troublemakers?
Yes, I guess through Mr. Chair. Yeah, so we recognize that, clearly, but before all this started, we do have a set of regulations that apply to the maintenance of yards, the maintenance of buildings, the generation of noise, but we didn't have aspects to deal with the regulation of parking and some of the other issues that were also coming about. So that those provisions that we have in place that manage, say, noise and some of the other disruptions created by boisterous, university students are still in place, right? And so they would be responded to by all three of those, right? So we still have an agreement with the Kawartha Guard to deal with issues after hours. Certainly the police look after issues related to trespass or noise. And through the day, our bylaw enforcement officer would deal with any noise generated while he's on duty. So we have the tools to deal with the peripheral effects of that sometimes occur with a large density of young people, and we have the people and or agreements, right, to help with the enforcement end of that as well.
Somebody want to move the recommendation? Anita, second by Carrie. All those in favor? Carrie. Okay, we have our last deputation, our federal Conservative candidate, Michelle Ferrari. Michelle, welcome. Take it off to speak. Yeah.
How are we?
We're well.
Thank you. Thank you, Mayor, and everyone in council for having me. Happy to be here. And for those of you who know me, I'm Michelle Ferrari and worked and lived in this community my whole life. Well, I didn't work when I was a child, but live here now. It's been a really interesting process. I had a conversation with the warden this past weekend, and he said to me, Michelle, it's really not fun, is it? I said, no, not really. But you all know that. That's why I bring it up, because it really is a call to service. It's not a job. So I'm here tonight to just sort of introduce myself, open the floor for questions, give the basic platform for what we're running. Like I mentioned, I do live in Selwyn. I live in Lakefield on William Street, and very proud to live here. Grew up in Duro. I was a Leahy, and I love this community. I think we're very, very, very fortunate. When I look at my friends who live in Toronto and in condos, we live in paradise. So I'd like to keep it that way. It's a beautiful place. In terms of our Conservative platform, what we're looking at doing, obviously, our first and foremost priority, and what I'm hearing at the doors, is the cost of living. So right now, people are really struggling, obviously, with groceries, hydro, housing. These are major concerns for the people that I'm talking to. So when we look at more of the rural end of things, obviously connectivity, as I sit here and try to get my cell phone to work and broadband and kids trying to get logged on to the online school, the Zoom, this is critical for us to stay connected, which is critical for us to be able to move forward. So we have a plan, obviously, to get connected, rural internet, cell service as well, not just connected, but obviously affordable. That's really, really key when you look at connecting people. You have to have affordability. So by 2025, we set that. Another big thing that's come up over and over again is when talking to the businesses. I am also a small business owner, so I too have been hit pretty hard by this pandemic. I lost 60% of my income in 2020 as well, so I know how devastating it is and that you can't really make up that income. But one of the big issues that we're seeing now on the ground when I talk to these business owners is getting people to come into work. So this has been a really, really big issue across the board. And we talk about this, how are we going to do this? So we need a transition program, obviously, in place to get people from CERB back into the workplace. And, the research shows the longer you're off work, the longer you're off work, right? It's really hard to get people to get back into that workforce. So right now, what we have offered is a subsidization program for employers up to 50%, depending on how long you've been off work. It's 25% up to 6 months. Then after 6 months, it's up to 50%, so that we can offset that wage subsidy for the employer and also get the economy back rocking and rolling. So that's one of our key things that we really want to do. We also have a couple of great programs that I wanted to read to that you may or may not have read. If you don't have, it's a nice light read, 155 pages. I think it's up to 160 now. Conservative.ca, the full platform is there. But one of the things that I think is really great as well is the secure job training for workers. So trying to get more trades as well. And also the Main Street loan. That's another one that I think will be important for small businesses. So the Main Street business loan is to provide loans up to $200,000. And this would be, I think, really effective for businesses trying to invest in their infrastructure as well. We have a 25% subsidization for people trying to build their infrastructure as well, which is great. In terms of guns, that's a big issue too that I hear in the rural communities. We will continue to protect law-abiding firearms owners. But of course, we are going to stick to doing effective background checks. So that's really important that we believe as well. And look at the function of a firearm rather than what it looks like is really important. Housing is obviously a huge, huge issue that we're hearing. So how do we get that under control? How do we stop people coming in and buying up these houses with no conditions, cash offers, and driving up the market? We obviously can't go backward because of the people who've invested in at this time. We don't want them to lose their equity. So we'll be looking in how we do that. And a lot of that means opening up the supply and demand issue. So supply and demand, obviously we have lots and lots of skilled people who can build houses. What are we doing to let them do their job, right? Let's get out of the way of them and let them do their job. A lot of seniors obviously need some help. So we need to look into that as well. It comes all back to getting the economy stabilized and getting people under control. In our region here, specifically to Selwyn, obviously climate's a huge, huge issue. The Trans-Severn Waterway, invasive species, what are we going to be doing on that front to help support? My mission and my role of how I see it is to be a mediator, to help be the voice and to deliver messaging to help sustain what we have, but build better than what we don't have. And obviously that comes into play as well with our Curve Lake relationships as well. What can we do to better improve all of these things? So there's a lot of work to be done, but there's a lot of great things here too. So very excited to answer any questions that you guys might have and open up the floor for that.
Thank you. Dolly? Donna?
Through you. Thank you so much, Michelle, for coming tonight, and also thankful to you for putting yourself forward. It's a monumental task. So good luck. And if you are elected, I wonder, do you have a plan to make yourself more accessible to your constituents on a regular basis?
It's a great question. Thank you very much for that. Yes, I think that is one of the things I hear at the door a lot. And I've talked a lot about this. Being from Durham, being a sort of small town girl, I make a joke all the time that I'm the Journey song. But the reality is that we are the heartbeat of the community. And so I think sometimes these outskirts and the rural components often get left behind. The constituents, last night I went out to Trent Lakes, I went out to Pirates Glen and Cordova on Friday night. These are like the far outskirts of the region that often feel so left out. And we can't have that, right? So what I would like to propose is, community outreach, regular meetings. Obviously I work in social media. My business is social media marketing, and I've done something that people have called me crazy for doing, but I give everybody my personal cell. It's interesting, but I do think it is critical. I believe that this service is customer service. And if the constituents can't reach you and if they can't be heard, we can't provide that service. So it is absolutely my number one personal priority to make sure that we are accessible and that we have the right people representing both here in the riding as well as in Ottawa to make sure the constituents feel heard.
Thank you.
Other comments? No. Just in closing, I want to say the same to you as I said to Joy. I've had the privilege of serving in Parliament, and I know just how difficult and how challenging both what you're doing now and what you may be doing if you're successful. So I just want to take the opportunity to thank you for your willingness to serve, your willingness to put your name forward, and your willingness to do all this. So thank you.
That means a lot coming from you and from all of you, to be honest, because I know you know you walk the walk. So it is not a job. It's an absolute way of life. It's a calling, and it's nonstop. So you guys are right back at you. You guys are actually doing it. So thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay, colleagues, that completes our deputations for this evening. Question period. Do we have a question?
We do have a question. We received a question from Mr. Arthur Torella, and I'll read it aloud. Have each of the council members been aware that Arthur Torella has been submitting amended construction plans to the manager/CBO for the May 24th, 2012 building permit applications since Honorable Justice S. Bale made his July 25th, 2016 endorsement and order?
I will answer that on behalf of council. Matters relating to the issuance of building permits are within the purview of the CBO, the Chief Building Officer, and are not referred to council for discussion or approval. Thank you, Madam Clerk. We will now go to officers, municipal officers and staff reports for direction. And the first one is on cannabis cultivation and processing to deal with our proposed bylaw. Rob.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yeah, so this is kind of the culminating document we've been working on cannabis regulations for some time. And so we had a public meeting on the 10th to hear from council and any interested members of the public. And ultimately, the intent was to incorporate any input we received during and prior to the public meeting, and to bring back a final draft of an amending bylaw to incorporate new cannabis cultivation provisions in our zoning bylaw. And so here we are today. So I did provide council with a summary of the last resolution passed on the 10th, which essentially said the final document should be here this evening. So we have made one amendment since having introduced the previous draft of the bylaw to account for input that we did receive during the public meeting from council. And I've provided a summary of what that looks like. Essentially, council was concerned with how we applied the setback provisions to sensitive land uses, particularly residences. Council expressed a want to ensure that where there's a density of residential population, that we measure the sensitive land use from the lot line as opposed to the dwelling itself. And so that's effectively what we've done. So where we have an adjoining residential land use that is zoned residential, then the measurement will take place from the lot line, and where the dwelling is located on a parcel that is more agricultural in scope and scale, we would measure from the dwelling. I think that provides the right balance given that particular context. So in my report, I've also summarized the input that we received from commenting agencies. We didn't hear any negative input from commenting agencies. And of course, we were supported in our efforts to put the bylaw together by Meridian Planning, and they were available to council at the public meeting to answer questions. Since we've had the meeting, the township did receive a letter from a consultant acting on behalf of the landowners of 290 Cork Line, expressing a concern with one aspect of the bylaw. I'll read the letter into the public record as they've asked us to do that. So the letter says, please be advised that on behalf of the owners of the lands located at 290 Cork Line, we hereby wish to register our objection to the information contained within Cannabis Regulation Report 2, presented at the June 22nd, 2021 council meeting, and its corollary cannabis bylaw recommended to be passed by the regular council meeting at the Township of Sylvan on the evening of September 7th. We have concerns with specifically, but not limited to, the following sections. Section 2.0 definitions. So and the definition is for agricultural use and agricultural produce warehouse. revised to clarify that these definitions are subject to the specific regulations related to cannabis cultivation and production provided for by this amendment. For example, a warehouse for the storage of distribution of cannabis would not be defined as an agricultural produce warehouse, and instead would be subject to provisions of this bylaw, amending bylaw, example, no accessory retail to the general public. We respectfully reserve the right to appeal this new bylaw on the grounds that the quintessential processing facilities that farms require for recognized crop, BioMAFRA, be considered as a permitted use accessory to outdoor cultivation areas. Yours truly, Nicholas H. Bell, BAH Harper, Dell and Associates Limited, Planning, Tax and Land Development Consultants. So I have, just for council's interest, I have corresponded with Nicholas, and I do plan on this discussing his concerns. Of course, this bylaw, before council has been studied or was supported by a study completed by a professional planner on our behalf. Certainly, council played a role in developing some of the language that we've put forward. It's the second iteration of such a bylaw. We certainly learned from the first iteration that there were gaps in the way that we were managing or that we were regulating cannabis, and rightfully took charge of the issue and decided that we needed to move forward to make amendments that were more in line with the geography in this area. It is, I think, a very, it's a measured document that accounts for the needs of the industry and the needs of the surrounding landowners. And I wouldn't recommend to council that we make any adjustments to it at this point. I am still satisfied with the recommendation that I've made that council should pass the bylaw. And in the interim, I'll do what I can to speak with Harper Dell and get a sense from them as to what specific issue they might have with the application of the bylaw. Clearly in their context, they have a landowner who's wants to move forward with the development of a property that we recognize is has been developed under the auspices of an existing bylaw, and so should benefit from the provisions in the Planning Act that limit our ability to apply the regulations retroactively. So perhaps just having that discussion with them might alleviate their fears, but I'm still advocating that we move forward with the recommendation as it's been drafted, Mr. Chair.
Okay, thank you, Rob. Just for clarification, the only difference between this version of the bylaw and the previous one was in response to, and you responded to what Councillor Ballantyne had asked about in terms of the measurement of the 300-meter setback. Other than that change, which you've gone over, it's the same basic bylaw that we reviewed at the last time this was before council.
That's correct, Mr. Chair.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you. I just wanted to clarify that. Donna.
Yes, through you to Rob. I just wanted to confirm. I asked this question to the consultant and asked that everything that we included in the bylaw would be defensible at LPAT or in a court or whatever. And his answer to me was everything that he recommended he felt was defensible. Is that correct?
Yeah, for sure. I think, yeah, they did put forward regulations that they believe they could support at an LPAT hearing, right? And rationalize how they came to them. Of course, ultimately, the decision would be made by the chair of the Ontario Land Tribunal. But they were prepared to defend the regulations that they put forward, right? So that's true. Yep.
And one more point, we did not add the odor part to our bylaw because they didn't feel it was defensible at this time and there wasn't court law to support it.
Well, yeah. So what I think what we were debating was reaction or the regulation related to the distance between the cannabis production or cultivation and a sensitive land use. Certainly the report that was provided to council from the odor consultants could have rationalized a larger number than the 300 meters we ended up with. If you recall, they talked about half a kilometer, upwards of a kilometer in some instances, depending on on conditions, geographic conditions. The scent could be smelled even further, right? So what we tasked Meridian with was finding a distance that was reasonable and defensible, and they came up with the 300 meters as a general rule. So in addition to that relates specifically to outdoor cultivation. Well, what we've said and what hasn't changed is a requirement that any indoor cultivation or production is subject to a site plan agreement and is subject to a zoning bylaw amendment. And so what we've said is that an applicant for a zoning bylaw amendment is going to be asked to support whatever setback they put forward. And if they're going to have to support it largely on the basis of what their odor consultant could support, and of course their consultant's report will be vetted by peer reviewed by somebody equally competent on our behalf, and it's the science that's going to dictate where the building goes, and so there's an awful lot in our zoning bylaw that I think provides the correct level of protection when it comes to the mitigation of odor. There's a recognition that this is a crop. It's a commodity that the federal government believes is something that that's viable, and so consequently we have to, when it comes to the outdoor propagation or cultivation of cannabis, we have to create regulations that are reasonable and don't essentially regulate them out of existence. So the balance was, let's recognize and pay closer attention to sensitive land uses like residences, and provide a something that's a bit more robust, particularly as it relates to proximity to highly, more dense areas, like the first application we've considered at 290 Court. But also we have to allow for the industry, to exist, and so we can't regulate them out of existence. So that's largely what we've done, I think, with the language we have in the zone in our current zoning bylaw that permits these things as a right when it comes to the outdoor use. But we understand that a lot of the concerns expressed by particularly municipalities in the south where cannabis cultivation is more prevalent, that there is an issue when the cultivation is taking place in buildings, and that we should have regulations that obligate applicants to pay close attention to how they're going to mitigate the odor and lighting that's generated by those facilities. And so that's the view that we've taken, is in those instances, let's ensure that the science will dictate how those sites get developed.
Thank you, Rob.
Just one follow-up.
Yeah.
I just want to thank you, Rob, and the rest of staff for all the hard work. And I also want to thank council for your support, because to date, it's been mainly an Ennismore ward issue, and I really appreciate all the support.
Thank
And
you.
I would support passing this bylaw.
So you're moving it? Sherry seconding it? All those in favor? That's carried. That'll go to the bylaw section. We have Mike, are you online? Mike Richardson?
Yes, I am, Your Honor.
Okay, did you want to speak to now this, we're not being asked for a decision here. I think you just want to describe the issue and see if there's any comments from council, if I have this right.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, we actually are looking for endorsement, but not to have it start this year if council sees so fit. They're certainly open to questions and to comments and even to taking it back if there's something that needs to be further discussed or reviewed. But the recommendation in the report is that the policy would be received, endorsed for implementation in the 2022-2023.
I'm confused, which is not hard to do. So when I read the motion, it says something different than what you just described, Mike. And let me just read it so that everybody knows what we're doing here. That the report of the manager of the recreational services entitled Facility Time Allocation Policy be received for information. That council provide their feedback to staff with respect to the draft policy, and that a further report incorporating that feedback be prepared to be considered for the adoption, which would occur in 2022. So I read that to mean that you're not looking for us to approve anything tonight. You're just simply looking for us to provide you input, and then sometime between now and 2022, you'll come back with a recommended policy for our adoption. So have I missed something?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, certainly a possibility that me coming off holidays, I've printed the wrong report. So
Mike, we'll just hold on for a second. Is Janice on the line?
yeah, I still am on the line. Yeah.
No, Janice.
Yes, I am here. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And yes, you encapsulated the recommendation very well. So we have the policy before council to obtain any feedback you may have. Certainly, there was some consideration to potentially bringing this policy into effect for this year. But given the timing that we're in now, the fact that there's some outstanding concerns from some of the user groups, and it's late in the day in terms of getting schedules put together, we have recommended that we get your feedback. And if you have some comments that would change or amend the policy in any way, we would come back with a further report and consider having the policy come in play for seasons that would begin in 2022.
Okay, so the issue is if councillors have any comments on the draft recommendation, and based on those comments, they'll come back. So I suspect, Councillor Ballantyne, that you want to make some comments.
Thank you very much. Through you to Mike.
So,
first of all, Mike, I totally support the fact that youth have to have the opportunity to participate in sports and the social aspects of it all. So I have no problem with that. It's, I think, as you know, Ennismore is a different community from a lot of communities. Lakefield may be the same, but I don't know the dynamics of Lakefield the same. And I see in your report that you contact the city of Peterborough, the town of Oshawa, and Whitchurch/Stouffville. Not sure how large the last is, but the other two are fairly large urban centers, and our community centers are rural and basically really supported by the local people. There are people still using the, and they're called community centers to the people because they are the center of the community. And there are a lot of people still living that put shovels in ground and picks and so on and laid brick and so on to build the first Ennismore Community Center. And then there are obviously people around who worked hard to do the addition to the second one. And there's a lot of people that played minor sports. They started playing hockey at 2, 3, and 4, went into the minor hockey, went into the juveniles, then went into the men's, and they now have their children playing hockey. They're coaching them, and it's just a really big part of their life. And they feel this is being the men who have some hockey leagues, that they need just a little bit more consideration in our ice allocation policy. And like, they don't want to take away from the young people because they're their own and they coach them and they understand the whole situation. But I just think we need to somehow come up with some type of compromise so that the older men that still wish to play hockey aren't playing at 11 o'clock at night, or 10 to 11 seems to be the ice time that is an issue. So that's, I guess, my speech.
Thank you, Donna. So, Mike,
Yeah.
on the specific point that Donna's raising, the balance between, I guess it's when the adult leagues can start and the minor sports ends. I suspect you may have had some conversations, and maybe you just want to address Councillor Ballantyne in what she said.
Yes, I would, through you, Mr. Mayor, for not having the final draft printed in front of me. That is my fault. The conversations absolutely took place with, and then they started, frankly, back 6 years ago when I first got here, because that was the first time that I was approached by the EMHA and the EGHA to ask for us to approach the various adult groups to look for the 7 o'clock time, because as all of council is aware, we consider prime time ice to be up to 11 o'clock. We base all our financial decisions on that. We do all our user reviews and our usage reviews based on 11 o'clock. So even in our own policies, we consider it prime time. We don't consider that late. 11 o'clock every day and before 4 o'clock every day is when we frame it out. So actually 5 is full prime all the way to 11 o'clock. So we consider that prime time. So 6 years ago, when we were first approached by the existing executives, we went to the various groups and said, this is something we'd like. We don't have a policy. We don't have and we know that you have historically used this time, but the kids would like to, the youth groups would like to have the 7 o'clock time. All you need to do is play at 8 o'clock, 9 o'clock, and 10 o'clock, and then that will accommodate them with a big enough block of time. Because if we go from 5 till 7, that's only 2 hours, which means they can't do any 90-minute games, which a lot of the age groups have to do a 90-minute game through the OHF. So in the last 6 years, they've been approached every single year. We've not gotten a lot of support in a written response or a written endorsement from the minor hockey associations, but this year we did. The president gave us a letter from both groups saying that they would support us going to the adults and actually formally asking. And then when that was combined with my work plan, including writing an ice allocation policy, they really went well together to take care of all of it. So 6 years ago would have been the first time they were approached. We got a flat no with the ladies group on Sundays night, and with the men's groups on Wednesday, and the ladies group in Lakefield on Sundays, and with the 2 men's groups in Ennismore on Mondays and Wednesdays. This year we met very formally with them. It's the second time in 3 years. 3 years ago, when we met formally with Wednesday, they received everything we requested. They said very many things that Councillor Ballantyne said, and again said, no, we really don't want to do that. We don't want our leagues. We're afraid that the leagues will fold if we start after 9 o'clock, because they do host a team every week on Wednesday nights. So this year we met with them again by Zoom. We met with all the youth groups, because if there wasn't going to be any requests for existing time, i.e. on the Sundays or on the Mondays or Wednesdays, then it wouldn't matter. We wouldn't need to go to the adult groups because the youth wouldn't be looking for any of the times that were being grandfathered, potentially grandfathered in. When we spoke about Sunday, which is a big men's night in Ennismore, there was no requests. We didn't approach them. When we spoke about Mondays, there wasn't a request, so we didn't approach them. We scheduled a meeting with the one night when youth hockey was looking for a little additional time. They were looking for 1 extra hour on the Wednesdays, which is what, again, Councillor Ballantyne referred to. There is no doubt that we are a small community and that the community absolutely lives and breathes hockey and attending the community center to keep the community together. I guess what the youth groups feel and have said to me over and over, or said to staff over and over, is that it's hard to understand why grown adults would be playing at 7 o'clock when a 14 or 15-year-old is playing at 10 o'clock on the same evening, and the time is broken up. So that's the feedback that we're getting, considering both sides. And we absolutely have no interest in seeing any of the adult leagues be reduced, be minimized, or the worst case, go away. But we also don't think it's unreasonable to play at 10 o'clock when we consider that prime time within our own definition.
Thank you, Mike. Is anybody else? Yeah, Anita.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This is not specific to this report, but I'm going to be bringing up something under my portfolio section. I'm just wondering if Mike is still going to be on the line at that time. There's a couple of issues that I'll be talking about.
Okay, Mike, you're staying with the rest of the meeting, right?
Yeah, as long as the internet still survives, absolutely. No, it's my plan to be here and to continue to be better prepared.
That's good. We'll come back to that. Don?
I just wanted to add one more night that has been a concern has been expressed to me, Mike, just so you know, and that's the Thursday night pickup hockey. Yes, they were given the 10 o'clock time slot last year because of COVID cleaning. And I don't know if they've talked to you or not, but they have talked to me that they hope that they wouldn't have that time slot again this year.
Well, and that they're Thursday night at 9 o'clock with that group that have been for quite a few years. And on Thursday night at 10 o'clock, the Minor Hockey Association actually prefer to have that time because so many of the group that's on at that time have part-time jobs till 8, 9 o'clock. So no, that was not requested.
So Thursday night won't be a problem.
At this time, no.
Thank you.
And if this ice allocation policy doesn't go through or is only a talking point right now, honestly, none of them would be affected because we don't really have any precedents or any direction with which to take away somebody's or to modify the ice schedule as it stands right now. It certainly wouldn't be recommended that if there isn't an existing policy to dictate why we would do that we would do that to existing customers.
So I think Mike, and I'm just going to, because that's the last comment from council. I think it would be, and councilors correct me if I'm wrong, the desire, if you could go back to the groups and see if there can be some sort of, I'm going to call it a compromise, but some sort of consensus arrived with everybody understanding they may have to put a little bit of water in their wine, to use that expression. At the end of the day, council will pass will pass something if it has to. That's our job, right? But we would much prefer, I think, that through discussions with all of the user groups, that you can come up with some sort of compromise that we're not it's impossible for everybody to get everything they want. But if everybody could get 80% of what they want, then we're moving towards a consensus. So I think council would like you to have that conversation and then come back. That's in no way to suggest that you haven't been working very hard to try to arrive at this. We all know how hard you work at it. But if you could have that conversation one more time, I think council would be appreciative of that. Sherry?
And in the meantime, I would move to receive the report and leave it at that.
Thank you. And Anita will second that. All those in favor, that's carried. Okay, colleagues. Thank you. And thank you, Mike. And if I could ask you to stay on the line, we shouldn't be too much longer because we're going into consent. I think that Anita has a couple of comments. So we are now into the consent agenda. And so I'm going to go down if anybody would like any items pulled from consent. So that's 5 through 9. Donna, which
5B.
5B, yeah,
Correspondence number 18.
5B and 618. Sherry, anything? No?
Just number
8B, which is the heritage. Oh yeah, of course. Okay, so let's see here. That's good. So let's go to 5B, and that is the one on the development charges. Yes, Donna.
Yes, now, this is actually Lane's report, so I'm not sure.
Is Lane online?
He's on holidays.
No, he's on holidays. Okay.
Yeah. So maybe
I will try to help you.
Janice, okay.
Yep, I'll try to help you.
Okay. One of the reasons that was given for increasing the fees for the development charges were the rising costs of building materials, wood, metal, and cement. And I hear through the grapevine that prices are starting to drop. I heard just the other day from somebody that was in the construction business that at the peak of the increases, a 2x4 was $16.99. It used to be 99 cents. And I think it's now approaching $8.99 or $6.99. So I think things are starting to level out. So I would like to defer this with, if council would support it, defer these charges until the market had some time to level out, possibly 1st of March, because I don't think it's like, we don't want to price ourselves out of the business, and hopefully this increase is not going to be permanent. And this was part of the rationale for increasing development charges. So I don't know what the rest of council feels about that. So I'll just open it up for discussion.
So perhaps if I could.
Go ahead, Janice.
So the development charges bylaw does include the provision that the bylaw will be indexed annually on the anniversary date, which is in September. So in accordance with the bylaw, it's a shall. If council wanted to change that, we would have to go through a public process to amend the bylaw. I guess what I would say is the construction index that we use is based on the previous years increases that we've seen, and really brings our development charge up to what it would currently cost us to undertake the projects that we have development charges for. So when and looking at in terms of the competitive issue, so we certainly, when we passed our development charge in 2018, we were the lowest of the comparators that we did look at, and people have been continuing to index their development charges over the past few years. So of course, the timing that they undertake the indexing, again, is based on the anniversary of the bylaw. So the timing would be different. So what that construction index percentage would be at the time that people's bylaws are indexed would vary. But again, we definitely are on the low end in terms of our development charges. And if we saw the prices do go down and steadily decrease, then that would be reflected in any adjustment that was to be made next year.
Sherry, did you have a comment?
Well, it might be irrelevant now because I was going to ask when we would defer it to, so.
Right, yeah, okay. Let me just respond to something here, because I think the challenge is the index that we're using. So we collect development charges because we have costs to deal with development. Those costs and how they escalate doesn't seem to me to correspond to the construction index. So whether the price of lumber goes up 8 times doesn't mean our costs in doing our work for development has gone up 8 times. It's gone up, but it probably hasn't gone up 8 times. So I'm looking at Rob because he's in the office here. Is the indice that we use to adjust their fee what's used across? Is that what everybody uses as the indice, or was that something that we chose, some choose and some don't choose?
Yeah, so Watson and Associates actually did the report, and we certainly took their advice as to which was the most relevant index to use. I guess to your point, I mean, certainly a lot of, maybe the majority of the development charge fee is allocated to complete works that are more public works related, but there's a chunk of it that is for construction activity, like new libraries or additions to buildings, that would be reflected in the non-residential building construction price index. I have to think that our consultant Watson Associates does quite a number of development charges on behalf of a number of municipalities, that their assertions would be tested by appeals to LPAD, and they've stood the test of time, right? So they wouldn't recommend something that was harebrained or otherwise, right? So they.
No, I'm not suggesting that they would, but
Sure.
I don't think they could have ever imagined
Sure.
in 2018
Yeah.
that we would go through COVID and see the kind of spike that we did. But if I could suggest sort of a way through this, because I didn't realize that we're tied because we already passed a bylaw on how we do it, is if we could ask staff to come back with I'm suggesting we pass this, but to ask staff to come back, let's say in 6 months, and see if the indice really does fall back. Because if this works the way it's supposed to work, then we should see a decline in the indice, as Donna has pointed out. Lumber is half what it was 4 months ago or 5 months ago, and see if it actually works the way it's intended to work, which is as the market hopefully goes back to, in air quotes, normal, that we'll see that indice come down. If that's because we would, to go through a whole bylaw process, I didn't realize that that's what we would be faced. So if council is comfortable with putting this one through, but asking to see whether in fact that indice does work, because it should actually come down. Does that make some sense, Rob?
Yeah, there's no question that the indice has risen because of the exorbitant increases in prices for construction related items, right? And to your point, they are coming down. And so consequently, the next time, which would be in 12 months time, right? Typically, I mean, that's what the bylaw asks us to do. In 12 months time, we would be asking Watson for the indice as in September of 2022. We should see either a modest increase or potentially even a decrease, right? If it works the way that you think it should, right? Which is a reflection of the cost of construction, right?
So
Not non-residential.
So maybe just add a little bit of extra work is if it's easy enough to do, is at the end of February, which will be 6 months into this cycle, you let us know what the indice has done. That way, if we want to make a change, we can do it in advance of September of 2022. That makes some sense?
Doesn't sound like we can change it.
No.
until-
What I'm suggesting is, let's say a report comes back in March and says this indice isn't falling back. We have 6 months if we want to do a change in the bylaw before September of 2020. That's what I'm saying. we would give ourselves 6 months to do a change
Okay.
if we got an updated report. So we'll pass this, but staff will come back 6 months into the cycle, let us know what the thing is doing, and then we could say, well, we're comfortable with it, and we'll let it go. Or we have 6 months then to do something. Like we can't retroactively change what's happening, but this would give us 6 months. So if colleagues are okay, we'll let this be part of the consent. And at the end, Donna, if propose a motion that we get that report after 6 months. Are you okay with that?
Yeah. So you want me to propose that motion?
Yes.
Okay.
Okay, well, I would, but I'm in the chair, so, okay. Okay, well, let's do that right now. So propose a second, all those in favor? Carried. Okay, that's done. Now we're on to item 618, which is, I believe no.
Yeah.
618 is done again, sorry.
And it's actually on this very topic. It's the city of Kitchener and the town of Plimpton, Wyoming, to request federal and provincial governments to review actions that could be taken, we're not certain they can, to help mitigate or offset the impacts related to the rising cost of building materials. So I thought if we supported that motion from those two municipalities, and see if the federal government or the provincial government could be of any help.
So you want to pull that one out and
I would.
support it. And so you're going
I'd
to make
like to support that.
that motion. Is there a
Absolutely.
second there? I need a second again. All those in favor? Carried. Okay. And that takes us to 8B.
I just wanted to let you know that our Municipal Heritage Committee did meet via Zoom between the last council meeting and tonight's council meeting, and that the MHC does recommend the maintenance plan so that Ed and Jackie can go ahead with their reconstruction and or they're fixing up their property.
Okay, thank you. And so that's part of consent. So when we pass consent, that will be passed. Okay, I think that's all that's pulled. So I need a motion to accept the rest of the consent agenda. Anita is moving that. Donna seconded. All those in favor? That's carried. Thank you, colleagues. That takes us, there are no petitions, so that takes us to updates. And so why don't we do, Anita, your update first, because you have something for Mike.
Thank you. So there's two things that are for Mike, but I'll first start with just a general one. I know that, so John Millage has been in contact with me. He's the former, CAO of, I think, Harvey Township at the time, lives out west somewhere now, but he's the creator of Vintage Lakefield. So some discussion has been had with John and some other people with regards to a suggestion for a Pearl Goodall recognition, whether it's the renaming of a section of the street or some kind of a plaque for anybody who grew up in Lakefield would have known what the amount of community service and organizations and things that Pearl did. And she's been gone for a number of years, but John Millage and his crew think that it would be a nice idea to do something to honor Pearl in some way. I know that John had sent an email to Angie, but she's on vacation. So just something for staff to maybe consider, come up with some ideas if they think it's a good idea, come up with some ideas and bring forward a recommendation. So that's one thing. Then there's the next two things are sort of directed towards Mike. I know that Mike has been in touch with John Millage again. Again, this is John Millage and a number of his people. He wants to know. I think there are plans to, they're hoping to have like an Indigenous memorial at Hague Point with First Nation, Curve Lake First Nation support and partnership. So they're hoping to do something in 2022, which is actually the 200th anniversary of the first settlers coming to Lakefield and area. So John, I guess, would sort of like to have some confirmation. I think Mike has been in preliminary contact with John with regards to this, like a grandfather stone. It would be on Hague Point, preferably actual stone that would come from that area. Curve Lake elders would have a ceremony. And so this is the plans that are in the works. And I guess John Millage is just kind of hoping that council and staff will support it so they can continue to move forward with their plans. As I said, he has a number of committee people that are interested, including Bruce Bell Chambers and some others. So Mike, did you want to, I know you've been on holidays. I'm just wondering if you wanted to add a little bit. I do have a lot of email correspondence from John Millage, May Derrick, and some others, Morris Switzer, back in April. So Mike, I know you've been on holidays, but did you want to add anything specific to your preliminary discussions with John Millage?
Yeah, certainly. The Marsden family was what he, sorry, through Mr. Mayor. The Marsden family is the what we were told. They wanted to do a memorial stone, and Ange and I have both been in conversation with John, or more accurately, in sending emails back and forth, saying that we don't see any reason why we wouldn't be able to do that. And once they know the specifics about what they'd like to do, where, we're sure that we can facilitate it, and we can even bring a report to council. But we haven't gotten a lot of specifics yet. It's been a really good idea, a really utilization study, but we're really just waiting on more specific information as to what exactly, where exactly, and kind of how exactly they would like to do it. We know it's in 2022 that they're speaking of, but that's kind of where it was left. That in general terms, we love the idea, and we'll work with their group and with Curve Lake Council to put something together and then bring it before council once we have all those details from them.
So maybe, Anita, you could move a motion
Okay.
that once they've fleshed this out, that might come back with a report
Okay,
with
so,
to further develop
make
that idea.
sense? okay,
So
all right,
somebody want
I
a
would
second?
move that
Yeah.
motion.
And so, Donna, all those in favor? Okay. You had it.
Okay, and
These
then,
items are kind of other business as opposed to portfolio, but just go ahead and
Yeah.
we'll dispose of it.
because the senior sustainability, there's not a whole lot happening out there. But I just, and again, with sort of comes under sustainability and culture a little bit. The middle of June, or sorry, middle of July, when all this stuff was going down about the campground, I actually missed an email from someone with regards to the MOU, the agreement between the Junior C Chiefs and the township, and I actually missed it. So I kind of got, slammed a little bit on Facebook. And anyway, I've been in correspondence, communication with this particular person. She is heavily involved in minor hockey. And she was actually quite upset, in a manner of speaking, with regards to the agreement that township has made with the Junior C Chiefs, that there's an agreement now to sell advertise, that the Junior C Chiefs can sell advertising anywhere in the arena, the board, Zamboni, etc. And she says that this agreement gives one team of grown men the ability to raise funds for their use, to the exclusion of Children's Hockey League in Lakefield. So the minor hockey Lakefield Chiefs have 15 teams, and they spend more money at the arena than any other user group in Lakefield. She also said that it appears this deal did not seem to follow the procurement policy of Selwyn Township. And apparently she had emailed staff asking for an explanation, but when I was last talking to her, she said that email had not been answered. So what she points out is that she said this deal puts minor hockey's ability to raise sponsorship funds for children in our community at a serious disadvantage. She said she would like assurance that anytime something to do with Lakefield Chiefs is presented to council in the future, ask, is it for the one team of men or the 15 teams of children? So the original Lakefield Chiefs were the minor hockey association, kids aged 5 to 21, and the majority of the kids live here to play for the Junior Cs which is the one team of men, you have to try out, and the majority of that team are players who are not from Lakefield. So this particular person is a resident of Selwyn Township, is the OMHA and the League of Eastern Ontario Rep. She's a registrar and communications chair for Lakefield Minor Hockey, and also the president of the Eastern Ontario Minor Hockey League. So she's got some very serious credentials. And so I guess she wanted to just express her frustration that with the agreement with the Lakefield Junior C Chiefs, that it does make it a real challenge for fundraising for the 15 minor hockey teams. So I told her I would bring it up at council tonight. So
Anita, I think what might be a good idea is that's a piece of correspondence. Let's get it on the correspondence section of the next agenda. It'll give us a chance to address it formally, and it'll give staff a chance to respond to it. So if colleagues are okay, we'll put that as a piece of correspondence on your next agenda. You can let the individual know that council will take it up formally at its next meeting, if that's okay. Okay, good.
Sorry, through you, Mr. Mayor, may I respond informally to that?
I would prefer, Mike, that we put it on the agenda in the formal way. But if you want to make a quick comment, but I don't want us to, we haven't had notice of this. So in fairness, it should go on the agenda, but go ahead.
I just wanted to make sure that council was aware that all of the executive were responded to when that came to staff. So we can absolutely respond formally to each of the points, but I certainly don't want council to think that this, because we were contacted by the same person and by the president of their league, and have not only met with them, but also put them in direct correspondence with the Chiefs Junior C, so they could work together and actually have it be a win-win. So it was the timing that I really wanted to make sure that council wasn't under the impression that 90 days or 60 days later, they'd still been waiting for a response when it was that same week that they were responded to.
Well, thank you for pointing that out, Mike, and we'll formally discuss this in, 2 weeks, 3 weeks, 2 weeks, whatever. Next council meeting. Donna.
My portfolio?
Yes, your portfolio.
Okay. So first, the Police Services Board. I just wanted to inform council that the OPP are currently researching the idea of using body and in-car cameras. Decisions are to be made in the near future. We also continue to receive numerous speeding complaints. One that's been very high level this in the last few weeks is Lily Lake Road. It's being reported to be problematic for the volume of traffic as well as speeding. So we will address the speeding at the next Police Services Board meeting, and hopefully the volume will change or improve somewhat with the change in the season. The Library Board, the silent auction fundraiser is being pushed to November 1st to 12th in hopes that it would be more successful when people are thinking of purchasing Christmas gifts, and they're still looking for donations if people are able. The Rec Committee will be meeting tomorrow afternoon, so I have nothing to report there. The link, the last stats that were sent to me, and I did communicate with, can't remember her name, Hillary, and she didn't have any more current ones. So the latest ones are August the 23rd to the 27th. Route number 31, the Curve Lake Field, it was 108, which is very good. Route 32 at Ennismore to Bridge North, 8, which is not so good. And Angie has worked with Trent to formulate an agreement whereby Trent students just, so we would be given so much money to cover this by the Trent organization, so that if they show their student passes, that they would have free transport on the link. So this will help with some of our finances and some of our ridership. And I have no new news to report from the fire department.
Thank you, Donna. Sure.
Through you. Business owners continue to struggle with getting staff, and as a consequence, hours and days of operation are being adversely affected. We keep hearing about different restaurants where they're pretty much closed Monday, Tuesday, and sometimes Wednesday now because they can't get staff. The Canoe and Paddle had 2 staff test positive and unfortunately had to close over the long weekend to deal with making sure that they proceeded with extra caution. The wall mural is looking great. And it's all been cleaned off now. It needs a little bit of work. And I think council received a report from Megan that the girl is coming back to finish the painting and to put a cover on it, like a clear coat. I'm just mentioning this for public consumption. Exciting announcement last week that Cottage Choice has started their construction of their new flagship store at the corner of Queen and Concession. And hooray, hooray, the extension of the sidewalk will come after the fact. So we will have it completed to Queen Street. There were kudos given at this announcement to Rob Lamar because of his guidance that has been given to Donna through this whole process. The old Stone Mill home is now being offered on Airbnb. They're not continuing on with their plans right now. And I just wanted to mention, although this isn't part of my portfolio, the Waste Management Committee has been reconstituted for the county. The city is not taking part in it, but we're going to be looking at all things waste. And I was told by Jennifer this morning that the clear bag use for this week, because it just started this week, hasn't been so great. Ennismore was around 35% that use them. North Smith was the same, and Wakefield, apparently there's still the dark garbage bags that are being used, and they're talking about possibly next collection. If they're not clear, they're not picking up. No, they're not picking up. Yeah. Oh, they might put a tag, I'm not sure, but I think we need to see what kind of communication is going to take place for that, because we're the ones who are going to get the phone calls. That's my report. Thank you.
If I could, Janice, did you want to comment, or does somebody want to comment on our enforcement approach over the next few weeks?
Yeah, for sure. So I will follow up with Jen. Certainly, we did not anticipate, a hard enforcement beginning, the second or third week of the actual effective date of the bylaw. So I think the intention is that there would be tags left. We have some door knockers that are going on. Hopefully, we have some part-time staff who would be kind of following the truck and leaving bags and clear bags at people's door, that sort of thing. So yeah, I will follow up on that.
Thank you. And I'll just briefly go through my portfolio. I had an opportunity to attend the AMO conference in August. We had that one delegation that had been approved regarding the difference between setbacks that are in a settlement area and in a non-settlement area. That's the way it affects in Chemong Road. And so we met with the Minister of Agriculture. Our MPP was there, Dave Smith. He supported our presentation and indicated that they were going to have some discussions and that they would come back to us. In terms of public health, we had an opportunity to introduce our new medical officer of health, who will be taking up his position on the 1st of December, but he was here and he had a chance to meet with everybody. In terms of Orca, I had an opportunity to meet with the new Minister of the Environment to discuss all things to deal with conservation authorities. In terms of the county report, there's a couple of things in there, including the pick for upgrades to the intersection of County Road 18 and the 5th line. So that's Chemung Road and the 5th line. So there's a pick taking place on that, which is probably good to see. There was also a short note about the Greater Golden Horseshoe Transportation Plan. And unfortunately, it's a very urban-centric document that really reflects a lot of the needs of urban GTA and probably not as much on the rural side. So county have sent correspondence to MTO to indicate that to them. Didn't even, for instance, have the plans on it for the VIA's new initiative. It was not even in the transportation plan. So that was there. And finally, I had an opportunity with Hydro. As you know, Hydro has now provides the electrical service for Lakefield. They've made it a donation to the food bank and to court. Pardon? Yes, thank you. And so we had an opportunity to do that. So that was good. So that's our portfolios. Is there any other new or unfinished business? Yes.
I have a question for you. The pick for the 5th line and County Road 18, is it intended to have a left turn lane going north and south? It was hard to tell from that little drawing.
I have that as a question to ask tomorrow.
Okay.
Because I couldn't tell either. I couldn't tell either from looking at that.
Okay.
So if you and I couldn't tell, I would imagine there may be others that are wondering about that. Okay. But that was a good question. We have some bylaws then. We have the zoning bylaw for Ennismore. We have the authorizing the agreement with the Trent, the student council at Trent, and we have the cannabis bylaw. So anybody move? Okay, Anita, seconded by Donna. All those in favor? We need a confirming bylaw. Okay, Sherry and Donna, all those in favor? And I'm going to need an alternative for a motion. Anita, seconded by Donna. All those in favor. Okay, colleagues, thank you very much. Thanks to all the staff for all your help this evening. We appreciate it. Everybody have a safe time.
Easy.